Okay, welcome everyone to the session that's starting at 2:30. My name is Mariah Buckman and I'm on the Utah Recycling Alliance Board. And I'm happy to introduce today Dr. Lisa Skumatz. She's an economist and heads the research and consulting firm Skumatz Economic Research Associates and the nonprofit Eco-Conservation Institute. Lisa has assisted more than 250 local, state, and national government agencies and industry clients on solid waste and energy efficiency, policy, and program research. Beyond her well-known work in PAYT, Lisa has a numbers focus using real-world data to help communities make well-informed program and policy decisions. With cost-effectiveness and performance in mind, Lisa has been a long-time contributor in community-based social marketing and has designed, conducted, and evaluated scores of social marketing and traditional outreach projects. She has developed best practices guidelines for evaluating behavioral programs for state regulatory authorities. Lisa has the unique distinction of winning the National Lifetime Achievement Awards from both the U.S. National Recycling Coalition, NRC, and the International Solid Waste Association of North America, SWANA. I did want to say that she holds a PhD and MA in economics from the Johns Hopkins University, and her BA in economics is from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and she holds certification in sustainability leadership and implementation from the University of Denver. She's also been an elected town trustee in Colorado for the last 8 years, so please help me in welcoming Lisa Skumatz.
Good afternoon. Can the people in the back hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, I need that feedback to know. Okay, great. Thanks so much for inviting me here this afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here at the Intermountain Sustainability Summit. It's my first one. Is it the first one? Fourth one? All right, so very pleased to be here. I'm going to be talking about creating a profitable recycling model, and I'm going to be trying to illustrate the lessons with numbers. So you're going to see a lot of numbers fly by, but I hope you'll take away the key lessons at the end. The three questions I'm going to work on are what increases recycling most and what's cost effective. And that relates to profitability, of course, because if you reduce cost or increase, impact revenues, then you increase your profit. Where does outreach fall in all of this? Where does outreach and education and that sort of stuff fall in all that? Is it cost effective? How does it perform? What makes it perform better? And then third, how do we do integrated planning to make cost effective both recycling programs, portfolios, but also sustainability portfolios? Those are the three things I'm going to try to hit on today. There are lots of different options that solid waste managers and communities and folks interested in doing so can try to modify how solid waste management gets taken care of. It can be incentives, you can have programs, you can have services offered either by city or private entities, policies, legislation, ordinances, that sort of thing, and also investment in infrastructure and facilities, either again, city or private. And there are lots of different goals that communities and others have in mind when they're trying to move solid waste management to a different sort of mix. That could be extending the life of landfills, reducing overuse of landfills, improving efficiency of their diversion programs, meeting citizen demand who all say, oh, I moved here from California, why don't we have better recycling here? Or, as an elected official, I hear that a lot in Colorado. Also, maybe they're trying to meet different kinds of goals, like 25%, 50% recycling goals, improving efficiency, or reaching environmental impact goals, like greenhouse gas, reduction of toxicities, or job creation and that sort of thing. So I wanted to look at what works, both programs and cost side of things, because as an economist, I can never look only at the impact side. I have to care about the cost as well. It's part of our mantra. So I wanted to do an analysis that looked at the trade-offs and cost effectiveness within a variety of solid waste management options that communities and others have available for them. So one of the things that we try to do is, the literature will have a lot of information on case studies. Seattle has this wonderful program that looks like XYZ, or Boston's program on ZYX has something great to offer. But you know, when you're trying to figure out what will work for your community, that information is almost useless because your community is nothing like Boston or New York City or anything like that. A lot of special characteristics go into how those programs perform in those particular towns. In addition, if you look in the literature, almost every case study you'll see there is outstanding in some way, which automatically defines it as not normal and not the impact that you will see. So for that reason alone, we really, while case studies are useful for maybe helping set goals or giving case stories for folks who really like to hear that or want an example of how something actually works, if you're looking at what is the cost effectiveness and what is the impact we're likely to see, you really need, I think, you really need to go large data sources. We gathered data on over actually 1,500 communities around the United States and Canada, and then used statistical analysis to try to tease out what were the big impacts and what were the big cost drivers in those programs. So you're going to see something that lets us tell then what's the bang and what's the bang for the buck. So both of those sorts of things we can tell by teasing that information out. So those of you who are math folks, I'm really sorry, but this is essential. Here's the saga. Okay, so the way that this graph decomposes is, if you go up the chart from 1 to 7 or whatever it is, that tells you how many additional percentage points of diversion you get by making that change. So if you were at 10% before and you pick something that has a 3, you will afterwards be at 13% diversion. So not too hard. And the ones that are blue are related to recycling, the ones that are green are related to yard waste or compost or organics. There are some red and gold ones in there for those of you who can almost see the color. This light up here is just terrible for letting you see the slides, and it's a real shame. But in any case, the red and the gold relate to how much something costs. So if it's a red one, it tells you how much extra it costs on the recycling side. If it's gold, it's how much extra it costs in terms of the organics program. So what you'd really like to know is, okay, when we looked at a whole bunch of things, we looked at pay-as-you-throw, P-A-Y-T, thank you, that helps a lot, I think. But nobody in the front row can go asleep now just because it's dark, okay? All right. So pay-as-you-throw, or P-A-Y-T, as was mentioned before, is a situation where if you put out more trash, you pay a bigger bill. If you put out less trash and recycle more, you pay a smaller bill and you get a reward. So pay-as-you-throw, going from 3 streams to 2-stream recycling, going from 2 streams to a single-stream recycling, having collection done more frequently, having less frequent garbage collection, which of course may drive you to recycle more, having collection on the same day, having no separate fee, a bunch of other things, mandatory and bans, and adding materials, those sorts of things are a bunch of the things that we examined, as well as things related to landfill tip fees, demographics, and a whole host of other things. But these are the things that are mostly under the control of the project manager or the program manager. They can't really control the local demographics or what percent of households are English as a second language or other things that also have a role. These things are things that you have as levers, generally. Okay, so when you go through this whole thing and figure out, so if you were looking for the ideal program, what you'd want here is a change that gets you a really high blue or green bar. That means lots more tons. And you'd like the red or the gold bar to be down underneath, because that means you're getting more for less. Okay? Or if, at the second best, you'd like a big tall bar for the tons, but a short bar for the cost. So you got a lot more with not much extra money. Okay? So we went through and we analyzed all that, and this is sort of the sub-list of what we found for the things that get you the most cost effectiveness, the greater potential profit, if you're talking profitability. Pay-as-you-throw was a real high one, and that was a high diversion impact. It did cost a little bit more, but it's because more tons go through the recycling center and actually end up costing a little bit more that way. But the program itself directly wasn't a significant cost. Every other week, either trash, recycling, garbage, those sorts of things were another big thing that had a good diversion impact and had good cost savings. Single stream, or going to fewer streams and including containers were another item that was a very cost-effective change. Using mandates and bans, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Education will have a little bit of a question mark because it's one of those that it depends. And then, of course, there are regionally appropriate options that we'll talk about as well, especially considering that we're here in Utah. First one, pay-as-you-throw. Very tall blue bars. Ooh, yay. Okay. So pay-as-you-throw is a system where you can have bags or cans, and you charge for trash by the bag or the can or the sticker or other things like that. The more trash you put out, the higher bill you have. The less trash you put out, perhaps through recycling or composting or other things, you have a lower bill. Therefore, you get a financial incentive for recycling and putting out less trash. The reason that pay-as-you-throw is especially cost-effective is because it not only encourages you to recycle, it also encourages you to compost, and it encourages you to pull things out of the trash by doing waste reduction or recycling at Goodwill, reuse kind of stuff, buying things that take less packaging. All those sorts of things save you in your monthly or whatever quarterly trash bill. It's very cost effective, and when we interviewed states around the U.S. that were leading states, some of the top performing states, every one of them said that pay-as-you-throw was one of the top 3 things in getting them to be a leading state around the U.S. One of the really important things about pay-as-you-throw is that it not only encourages recycling through a curbside program, but it also strongly and almost to the same effect encourages curbside or recycling at the drop-off. So it's a program that works in urban and rural areas both. It has some strengths and weaknesses, and every program does. But the main, almost every weakness of the program, or every concern that people have, like illegal dumping and a bunch of other things like that, turn out to be a much bigger upfront concern than realistic concern after the fact. But every technical issue has been solved by one of these 7,000 plus communities in the U.S. that have pay-as-you-throw. And in every one of those cases, the only barrier that's a really significant barrier for pay-as-you-throw is political will. It's a real, elected officials just messing with trash is something that can get them out of office almost as fast as messing with snow plowing and having that not work well, right? In wintry areas. I don't know how many remember the mayor of Chicago getting ousted for snowplow problems, but in any case. So it's a political will issue, it's not a technical issue in any way. There are lots of ways to implement it, using ordinances or contracts or other kinds of methods. And what's funny is a lot of times haulers oppose pay-as-you-throw. But in fact, in a hauler, in most cases, the way that pay-as-you-throw goes in place says, you shall offer trash paid for by pay-as-you-throw, and you will be required to offer recycling for no additional fee, which means you embed the cost of the recycling program in the trash. The city has just mandated that you double your business and get paid for it. And I don't understand why a hauler would be against that. It just does not, it doesn't compute for me at all. So I think that is just a link that just hasn't really been clearly made. There are lots of techniques about best management practices I'm happy to talk about at length. Pay-as-you-throw is widespread around the U.S. The darker green areas have more pay-as-you-throw programs than the lighter green areas. The Southeast has been a particularly weak area, and the mountain states haven't been all that strong either. But the real strength is sort of in the Northeast, the Midwest, and the West, and a couple of those areas are areas where landfill tip fees are quite high, a natural driver for this kind of a program. You can see also how the programs have grown over time, and we have a new count that we'll be issuing shortly. One of the things that's important about pay-as-you-throw is that it's also cost-effective. There are other ways of providing incentives for recycling, financial incentives to households. Some of those are rebates for a household that does recycle. So a lot of communities used to have, or some communities used to have something like, if you put out a recycling bin, you get $1.50 off your trash bill, something like that. That turns out not to be a very strong incentive because as soon as you meet the threshold of, I participated, might mean an aluminum can, I'm not quite sure, and enforcement's kind of tricky, then there's no incentive to recycle more versus less. Under a pay-as-you-throw program, the more and more you recycle and the more and more you take out of that trash bin, the more money you save. So it's kind of an incentive there. The other more recent innovation in incentives is Recycle Bank. Recycle Bank is a program, for those of you who aren't familiar, where they either weigh or they weigh your recycling or they count the number of times you put out your recycling, and you get points on a website that rewards you for those pounds or those recycling behaviors. But you'll find that from the numbers that we have here, either for recycling or for total diversion, pay-as-you-throw gets more tons. And from a New England example in the lower left, again, pay-as-you-throw got a lot more tons. And the cost-effectiveness side, we found that pay-as-you-throw was about anywhere between 1/9 and 1/30 or something the cost of a pay-as-you-throw program. The other way around. Okay, pay-as-you-throw was cheaper by that kind of a factor. And in fact, pay-as-you-throw is the cheapest among all these kinds of options here in the lower right. And it's partly because pay-as-you-throw encourages not just recycling like Recycle Bank, but pay-as-you-throw encourages those 3 things, organics or composting, and source reduction as well. So you have a triple whammy, triple impact, and that really increases the effectiveness of the program. Number 2 in that chart would be efficiencies, altering the collection frequency. Nobody came on from on high and said, I must have weekly recycling, or I must have weekly trash, or I must have weekly yard waste. That's a decision that a local community makes. And frankly, the biggest cost of having any kind of collection, trash, recycling, or yard waste, is the truck coming by your house. If you have the truck come by your house less frequently, you save a lot of money. And the question is, how much of an impact does that have on how much you actually recycle? Well, we did some of the analysis in that chart that you saw earlier, and what we found is that if you go from weekly to every other week recycling, you lose a couple percentage points of recycling. Maybe you go from 16 to 15% or something like that. Maybe 16 to 14%. But you save 40% of the costs. You'd think it might save half the cost, but it doesn't, because you're still collecting almost as much recycling, just doing it on an every other week basis. But you save a tremendous amount of money for giving up a percentage or two of recycling. Now, if I were running a city program, I would look very seriously at that. And the way I would especially look very seriously about that is I would say, gosh, I could substitute that stop that used to be a recycling stop. I could make that be a yard waste stop. And that yard waste program is going to pick up another 18%. Who cares about 2% if I can get 18% more for almost that same cost? So the cost effectiveness thing really comes in strong. And I know you want more recycling, but more recycling cost effectively, or more all kinds of diversion for a given cost, is clearly, I think, something worth serious consideration. You can also mess with this sort of stops thing by changing the frequency of your trash collection. There's nothing that said, all right, there are sometimes city or state, or often city or state laws that argue that the health department argues you need to have weekly trash. But if you move your putrescibles, the yard waste and the food waste, into a new can and have that one be collected weekly, why is it the trash can or the leftovers that are no longer recyclables or organics, why would that have to be collected weekly? There are lots and lots of towns around the U.S. that have been able to make arguments like that, or work with the health department and change the requirements so they can collect trash every other week, yard waste and organics weekly, and recycling every other week. That's a real great savings, because it's all about the stops. 80% and more of the cost is getting the truck to the door, regardless of what or how much you're picking up. So it's really worth figuring out how to optimize the number of stops that you have and getting the maximum bang of diversion you can from the minimum number of stops. Going from 3 stops a week to 2 stops a week, either through every other week, through reducing one of the trash or whatever collections. Best of all is every other week trash, every other week recycling, and weekly organics. Another thing that you can do to try to increase the cost effectiveness and profitability of your recycling program is to go to single stream recycling. Assuming there's a facility around that can sort single stream recycling, of course. So assuming that's in place, and if you get more tons because it's more convenient for households and they get to make fewer decisions. It's either trash or recycling. It's not trash, or it's this recycling, oh gosh, that bin's full, or whatever. So it turns out that people recycle quite a bit more, on the order of 40% more when you go to single stream from multiple streams. And you have cheaper collection as well, because you can go to automated collection, one bin, no labor for getting out of the truck, sorting, or any of the rest of that stuff. And often fewer trips than to the house as well, one trip. So that's another big cost savings and big impact on tons. Again, you need the infrastructure, the processing infrastructure available. One of the really big benefits, I think, of the single stream movement has been that that's a real savior for the problem that we had in the commercial sector. So the commercial sector didn't have space in the back for a bin for cardboard, a bin for containers, a bin for whatever. They have space for maybe a bin for recycling, but they don't have a space for multiple bins. Sometimes they don't have space for even the bin, but in any case, you can at least solve the problem for a lot of commercial buildings that were seriously hampered previously. So it's a very important topic. I'll be happy to talk about the glass issue at length with anybody who wants to in the question period, because the whole issue is, what's your perspective? Where are you concerned? Are you concerned about, does your purview stop at sort of the household plus collection, the household plus collection plus processing? Do you worry about world markets, or where does your concern stop? Happy to talk about that at length with anybody who wants to. One of my reasons, certainly I'm not the biggest advocate of the dirtiest material that we can get by with. That is not why I think that single stream bears a look. The reason I think single stream bears a look is its cost effectiveness, and because there's innovation in trash collection all the time. Trash collection went to automated containers. Nobody has to get out of the truck, saves loads of time. You can get more like 1,100 houses done a day or something like that, as opposed to the old 5 or 6 or whatever 100 that it used to be. So significant increases in efficiency. The problem was, if we don't continue to evolve in the efficiency of recycling collection as well, recycling has become more and more expensive relative to trash. It's going to make a harder and harder case for us to keep recycling in the mix. So that's one of the things. If one innovates, the other better stay as parallel as possible, or the gap is going to get large, and it's going to be a harder case to make for the sustainability of the recycling programs. One of the things that's been very effective also, part of single stream, has been the fact that it's almost always offered in a 96-gallon container. 96-gallon containers, rather than those awful little 18-gallon things, makes a huge difference in how people recycle all by itself. So that combination is because of both the larger container and sort of the lack of a limit and the efficiency of collection. One of the really biggest bangs for the buck is putting in mandates and bans. One of people's, politicians' dream program is, you shall do this, or we're going to penalize you, right? Great idea. But I have to tell you, if you're going to spend some political capital, as if you might be a recycling coordinator or something, if you're going to spend the political capital, here's where you're going to get some actual bang for that expenditure of capital. Mandates and bans are in that place over there, pretty tall numbers, and it can be either mandatory pay and they can't make you participate, or it can be mandatory separation, you can't put something in the other container, or mandatory recycling, you have to have a bin out or something like that. There are lots of different ways to do it. The overall arching thing is it's a mandate or a ban. And there are different materials that are mandated and banned, sometimes individual recyclables, sometimes any source separated recyclable out of a list, sometimes even organics in a number of states. There are requirements for recycling, or there are bans against disposal of yard waste in a number of states, that sort of thing. Almost all of the really successful high diversion cities have some kind of mandate or ban in the residential or commercial or both sectors. And enforcement is really important for impact, and there are a whole host of different ways you can enforce. The barrier here again is political will, and you need to have processing capacity in order to do it. You need to make sure that if it's mandated for businesses, that there's space for recycling. You need to have the ability to do enforcement, and it's very valuable, especially on the commercial side, that you have a technical assistance program to help explain to businesses how they can actually recycle in their business. But the impact on the costs and the diversion are huge. So this is a set of programs that include what people most often want to put in place. Includes some education, includes some incentives, includes some technical assistance programs. That's what you get on the left for about $1.5 million. On the right, if you include bans and mandates, you get many, many times more tons for exactly the same city dollars. And to me, if you're gonna argue before a city council for a portfolio of programs, I'd sure rather argue for the ones on the right. Even though there's going to be a political cost, there's going to be a lot more tons. And yeah, another set of programs here, we saw numbers anywhere from 11 to 20 times more tons from the same expenditure of dollars for different communities around the U.S. Are you trying to get to goals, and are the politicians behind the goals? If the politicians are behind the goals, if they're serious about those goals, then mandates and bans is the quickest, fastest, cheapest, way to get you to that kind of goal. If they're not serious about the goals, then sure, mess around with some of the softer programs that everybody's willing to do, because it doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't make anybody do anything different. Oops, I did that one too. I want to talk a little bit about regionally appropriate options. One of the things, Utah, as Colorado, where I'm based, has a lot of rural areas, and in a lot of cases, a drop-off program makes great sense and can be very, very cost-effective. And you can have drop-off yard waste programs, drop-off recycling programs. You can also have drop-off trash programs, and even pay-as-you-throw programs that are drop-off. You can have options that are simple baling, really low-key facilities where you maybe at a transfer station you claw out some of the most valuable things from, say, construction, demolition, C&D debris. Or you can make sure that cardboard gets pulled out because that's super high value. Some simple baling, all that can be a very cost-effective option. Pay-as-you-throw is really inexpensive. We talked about that before. And incentives for getting investment by partners or private industry is another very cost-effective way to look at how, if you can guarantee tons, or if you can, pass a law, a mandate that says we're going to require yard waste to be diverted, which then makes a compost facility feel comfortable about investing in the compost facility because they know they'll have enough tons to make it work. Those are the kinds of partnerships that can work really well, and do so at a local level. One of the things that you need to look at is your market conditions, and there are a few sort of overarching rules in recycling, but I'm going to say, on the whole, on average, glass and compost markets need to be close because the value to weight and transport cost ratio just doesn't make sense for that to go long distance. You can make high value things like aluminum and other things make sense for shipping them farther. So that's sort of, if you're looking for something that has high value, you're going to be looking at a subset of the materials, not all the materials, and why not start there and grow? Where does education fall in all this? Well, education is everybody's favorite program. And I mean outreach and education. I don't mean K-12 education. I mean outreach to the public and that sort of thing. Well, if you have a stakeholder, let's say you're putting together a recycling plan and you're, oh gosh, we're going to try to get to 25, 50, whatever percent, right? And you get together all the stakeholders in the meeting, and you got all these numbers about what performs well and all that, and then you get everybody to discuss and say what their favorite is. I will guarantee you every single person in the room will say education is really important because people need to understand about how important it is to recycle and how good it is to recycle and all that sort of thing. No one has to, you can get a few incentives and a little technical assistance and stuff like that, but you will not hear them say things like mandates or bans, or in a lot of cases you might not hear them say pay as you throw, because every one of those things makes somebody change a behavior in a fundamental and significant way. Honestly, if you get a group of stakeholders together, they just, except for a few green folks, the majority want the status quo because, oh my gosh, it's a whole lot easier. On the education side, it's been a problem because, yes, you need education. A drop-off facility is never going to get used if no one has any idea where it is, right? That's pretty basic. But how much impact does education have, and how cost-effective is that? I have almost never seen an evaluation of how much extra expenditures on education get you in the recycling field. It's been a real shortage of information. And how do you figure out what works best? Is it, flyers, brochures, what is it that works? So we did do some work on, we gathered information on 130 campaigns on recycling education a few years ago for the state of Iowa, but we did it nationwide with an oversampling in Iowa. We found an impact. We found that spending an extra $1 a household a year got you between 1 and 3 percentage points of recycling. We did not have the budget or anything to measure how long that effect lasted. And I will bet you it did not last very long. I'm going to bet you it decays pretty fast. You nudge people, you tell them to do something, but then after a few months or whatever, a few keep that behavior going, but not a lot. I'll talk a little bit more about persistence in a little while. We also looked at what worked best in urban areas versus rural areas and some things like that, but that's all in the report. If anybody's interested, you can email me for that report. We've also looked a lot at social marketing and the measurement of that kind of effect, and I'm going to tell you a lot about that. The bottom line is that we put education on the same graph as the other things. What we found over on the right was that the cost was pretty significantly higher than the impact. You got that 1 to 3 percentage points, but you got it at the cost of $1 a household a month or a year. And the impact was, if you were already spending a lot of money, that impact wasn't very much. If you weren't spending very much at all, if you were only spending 25 cents a household a year or something, that $1 goosed you up maybe 3 percentage points. But if you were already spending a lot, you get a marginally smaller impact for that extra buck. So anyway, very little information though on education impacts, and I think it's really important. Education needs to be part of the portfolio because people do need to have some information. But the question is, how big should that part of the portfolio be? I'd say that's a big question mark to this day. The decision maker then has the dilemma. Do they go for cost effectiveness? Do they go for politics? What about political will, and how does How about, do you go for the high impact things that don't cost very much? Or do you go for the things that don't make anybody mad and you don't get diselected and that sort of thing? So, and you don't rock the boat. It's a real big problem. And so I think all I try to do is arm people with information that they can then try to bring to their councils and make arguments for a sophisticated case of what they think ought to move forward. And that doesn't mean you have to take these recommendations, but you should know the implications of the choices you're making. And that's all we're trying to do here, help make it more cost-effective and effective. So what about education? How do we make education more effective? Well, one of the things that I have a really big problem with is over and over again I see people putting out education that's information. So, information about recycling and how it's a good thing to do and it's green and that sort of thing. I think that when we're looking at that kind of a message in the clutter of all the other messages that we're getting every single day in the marketplace, in the media, I think it's really hard to make that have any effect on people, much effect on people at all. Yes, I'll grant you, they need to have a calendar to know what day collection is, but if you're spending, a lot beyond that, I think you need to think about some tweaking of the education message that you might be making. The three things I want to talk about very briefly, yes, not too briefly, I'm doing okay. The three things I especially want to talk about are concepts called self-efficacy, using indirect effects in your marketing, and also social marketing and the return on investment you get for that. Self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a feeling of empowerment. It says, what I do makes a difference regardless of what everybody else does. The opposite of that is sort of like, what I do doesn't make a single bit of difference because there are 5 million people doing something completely different. I'm powerless. So there are people who have a feeling that they have an impact. They can make a difference. And then there are a whole bunch of other people who don't feel like they can at all. The trick in your messaging is to try to move the people who are not quite to self-efficacy, to the near guys, up to the self-efficacy thing. Because there are a lot of positive things that come out of people who believe in that they have that empowerment, that they make that difference. And it's important to advertise and educate them on what are some local actions that they can take that really do make a difference. My favorite quote is, how bad for the environment can throwing away one plastic bottle be? 30 million people wonder, right? So that sort of illustrates that point. Well, if you get people to a feeling of greater self-empowerment, self-efficacy, they participate more. 90% of early signups in a renewables program in the TVA area were people with high self-efficacy scores. They are the early adopters for green behaviors. They conserve more energy. They signed up for the recyclables, the renewables, and the Energy Star programs in a Northeast project that we did. Here in Utah, those people with higher self-efficacy scores recycled 11% more than those people who didn't. So it can make a significant difference. We've evaluated Cool the Earth and Green Campuses programs and other kinds of education K-12 programs as well, and found that those with high self-efficacy scores adopted more of the green behaviors that were being forwarded by the program than those who didn't have those scores. So the trick is to move people to understanding that they can make a difference and making them believe that, and showing them some local things that they can do that make that difference. Okay. Next topic as a tweak to how one markets. Indirect effects. Let's think about energy conservation for a moment. I spend about half my time in energy conservation as well. There are effects beyond, let's say when you weatherize a home. There are effects well beyond just energy savings, which is what the utility tells you about. There are effects way beyond just energy savings from instituting that weatherization program, from agreeing to participate in that weatherization program. They have to do with comfort, fewer sick days for your children, fewer lost days from school, less drafty rooms, lower maintenance of old equipment, a whole bunch of other things that make a difference to households. In a business, we found that that people weren't accepting the motor that the utility was trying to push, that was trying to promote the most, that had the biggest rebate, and they had the best cost effectiveness from the energy point of view. The utility could not understand that, so we went did a bunch of interviews, and we found that the one that they were trying to promote was a certain size. The second one they were trying to promote, the next best one, had a footprint that was about a third the size of the other one. Do you think that space is a little bit of a valued commodity in the commercial sector? Absolutely. So footprint mattered more to them than the direct savings. Plus, I will tell you that when we interview energy customers anywhere in the US, especially business customers, we ask them, so you put in those new lights, or you had that new motor, or whatever. Did you see bill savings? The number one answer I get is, I have no idea. So we keep promoting things based on the factors that matter to us. The energy utility is trying to sell energy savings. We are trying to sell recycling for recycling or maybe landfill reasons or whatever. But there are other things that matter to the people who are undertaking those programs that aren't our valued things. We need to put our hats on that are like the people who are consuming, and the bottom lesson is we want to sell them what they want to buy, not what we want to sell. How's that for a message? Do you think maybe Procter & Gamble has gotten that message? We did a project in Northeast or Northwest City, looked at all the other things beyond recycling that people were getting out of the recycling program. There was a 10-to-1 ratio for the value of the other benefits they got beyond the simple recycling that the city all cared about. And that's clearly what drove the participation in the program, not just the recycling. So here's my saga about Tide. So let's talk about Procter & Gamble and Tide. Do you think Tide sells Tide on the basis of, buy Tide, it's our most profitable item? I bet you that's why they want to sell it to you. I'll bet you that's a very important part of why they want to sell it to you. But they would never say that in a message. They would never say, buy it because this is why it benefits me. They would do some market research, some basic market research, and they would find out what people like about Tide or what they can get people to care about Tide, and they will sell it on a miracle wash, or they will sell it because it'll make Betty White happy if you buy Tide, or it'll make your clothes whiter or fresher or smell better or whatever it is. That's what they'll sell it on. They will not sell it on the fact that Procter & Gamble wants to make more profit. We need to stop selling energy on, buy this energy efficient refrigerator because it's energy efficient. The people who care about energy efficiency have already bought the energy efficient stuff. Let's sell the next group of people. If they want to buy it because it's pink, sell it because it's pink. Who cares why they do it? Just sell it to them on the things that they care about, not what you care about. And we need to think that same way, that same kind of market research in the recycling side as well. We all think we're very smart. We go and we say, let's do this recycling program and we're going to market it. And everyone's going to care about this greenhouse gas climate change stuff, right? Because that's very hot in the news. Well, we went into some focus groups and we said, we're going to do this program and what resonates with you? We all know landfills are not a problem, right? The landfills are not filling up and blah, 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 right? Every focus group went out. The reason people wanted to recycle more was to stop landfills from filling up. So is it our job to say, you're recycling for the wrong reason? No, that we can definitely try to bring them along, but if we're selling them recycling, sell them for the reason that they want to buy it. We don't have to be smart, the smartest guy in the room. We don't have to force that on the people. We just have to get them to recycle more. So let's do it in a way that makes sense for them. Social marketing is another thing that we can do. And social marketing says, rather than just educate people and give them information about recycling, let's look at what their barriers are and their motivations are. This relates a little bit to the last issue, but not quite. But information doesn't have to be the sole or most important part of the education that we do. It's identifying barriers and helping solve them. It's figuring out what their motivations are and capitalizing on that. And rather than just sort of the usual blanket information like, okay, here's 5,000 brochures we're going to throw out, or build stuffers we're going to do. Instead, it works with connections. It leverages culturally, individually sensitive links. It reaches people through friends or through neighborhoods or other things, churches, whatever. And it also tries to use techniques like prompts, norms, incentives, pledges. And those of you who have read the CVSM literature are probably quite familiar with that stuff, and I'm happy to talk about that at any time. Using social marketing has been touted as something that's really effective at getting people to change behaviors toward green-type behaviors. And I think it's really been very valuable. And the problem I have is that when we review the literature, we've done a lot of social marketing programs, but when we review the evaluation literature, we find a lot of reports that say, look at this big impact we got, or most commonly, look at this really cute poster we used, or this really great mailer we had, or whatever. They don't look at the cost side of these things, and it's wrong, I think, for a field to have 20 years plus of work out there and not have an evaluation that I think that holds any water at all. So, it's great if it has a big impact. It's a whole lot better if it's cost-effective impact. So that's the thing that's been terribly missing in this field, as has the persistence of that behavior change that's induced by the programs. So it's great if you have a 10% impact, but if it lasts a week, really, was that money well spent? I'm not sure. So you need to figure that out. The cost effectiveness has to be part of the evaluation. The persistence has to be part of the evaluation when you're looking at a social marketing program. We did a social marketing project specifically designed to measure those types of things recently in Colorado. And we did 3 neighborhoods, one of which was no impact, a control group, an area where we did social marketing without a door-to-door component, and then a neighborhood where we did with a door-to-door component, a very expensive element of a potential outreach program. We found we got a whole bunch of, we recommended both recycling and energy conservation behaviors. We got a whole lot of commitments, and about half of them were recycling type commitments, about half of them were energy type commitments, with doing laundry in cold water and paper recycling being among the most popular of the items that they wanted to commit to. The least popular was talking to my neighbor. Not too shockingly in this day and age, right? The most important impact that we got was out of this graph here. This graph says, and it's an argument for the really important part of having a control group. So group 1 was a control group. We did no influence in that. All we did was measure. In the second one, we did social marketing with no door-to-door. In the third, we did door-to-door and social marketing, the same social marketing stuff. Right away, we had a pretty big impact in Route 2, but we had a much bigger impact in Route 3, the blue bar. That was a pretty big impact, quite a bit bigger from that door-to-door component. But what's really important is that we also had a big influence for some reason in Route 1. Maybe that was something that EPA did nationally, or maybe it was the We campaign from the Climate Alliance or something like that. You don't know, but that's why it's really important to measure what's going on. Otherwise you would have said, oh, look at that really big impact in Route 2 that we got from our program. No, you got the increment above what happened in the baseline. So in any case, it's still an important impact. It's also important that you got a lot bigger impact in the third route where you did door-to-door. 6 months later, or 9 months later, or wherever, 9 months later, look at how much Route 2 fell off. Look how much Route 3 retained. That personal component had a really big impact on how much people still kept recycling. So I think that's a really big driver, a really big impact. You get some retention, that's really good. At least 9 months, we're still measuring. But what's the hanging question in the room? How much extra cost? Was it worth it, right? Well, it turns out that social marketing with a visit was more cost effective, so halfway down there. With a visit was more cost effective, cost less per ton than the social marketing with no visit. There were so many fewer tons that it cost more to get any ton it cost less to get a ton from going door to door than it did from not going door to door. It's worth spending this implies that it's worth spending your budget going door to door for just a sample of your homes this year, and another sample next year, and another sample the next year, and spreading that budget out over a few years, than it is just making sure you get everybody with something. This seems to imply that a door-to-door is an important component in not only getting a big impact, but getting an impact that stays. The last thing I want to mention, I'll just spend a few minutes on this, is how do you identify the profitable recycling and sustainability program mix, that portfolio? So, those of you who are involved in solid waste, it's been kind of depressing because, when people are looking at greenhouse gas and emissions causers, here's solid waste up there with a 3% sad little part of the pie, right? And all the attention goes to transportation and electricity. Oh my gosh, those are clearly the most important. Everyone pretty much blows off solid waste when they're looking at doing sustainability plans. And looking at this, you'd say, why not? Why would you do anything else? Well, as an economist, we worry about, maybe some of those are cost-effective tons that you could get out of the atmosphere. So let's just try to compare that. So that's what we did. We evaluated a bunch of solid waste programs and a bunch of energy programs, including some of the most cost-effective ones like commercial lighting. Residential weatherization is not all that cost-effective, but in any case, it's one of the ones that's well-funded, especially out of the stimulus packages, those of you who were involved in that expenditure knew. So we did a little bit of evaluation to figure out, okay, what's the relative dollars per metric ton of carbon equivalent for these programs? And if you look at the blue bars, you find that low-income weatherization is significantly higher than that incentive trash rates, aka pay-as-you-throw. It's also more cost-effective less cost-effective than some of the social marketing things, and it turns out it's less cost-effective than curbside recycling. And those of you who work in organics know the numbers on organics and greenhouse gas are really fluffy right now, so I didn't bother putting that one up here. Now we can also worry about, so we've got the metric tons of carbon equivalent, and it looks like trash things, those blue bars over on the right, perform really well compared to the energy things that people are funding willy-nilly, right? And so it's really important that when people are talking, in your community are talking about putting together a sustainability plan, you should be at the table because you are the cheapest programs out there for getting greenhouse gas reductions. Now you can also normalize by the lifetime emission, the lifetime of the program and all that sort of thing. In that case, some of the recycling program and some of the other ones do less well, but you'll see that except for that program, they're still right within the ballpark, so it's still worth being at the table. Job creation, how does that perform? You know, one of the arguments for doing the stimulus money on some of the energy programs was, oh, it's going to make a lot of jobs, you know, weatherizing all those homes, that's, you know, a lot of door-to-door people and all that sort of thing. Well, so yes, job impacts vary a lot depending on the type of program. You know, over on the right, you get a lot more jobs out of yard waste programs than you do out of landfill, and you get a lot more than that out of recycling programs. And on the weatherization versus appliance replacement side, on the energy side, you get a lot of difference also, not only based on the type of program and whether you're going door-to-door, installing, installation, and the rest of it, but also how much of that equipment is made here in the U.S. or in that state or in that service territory, whichever perspective you're coming from. And what you find is that, yes, weatherization has good job creation. Appliances don't in a lot of cases because a lot of the appliances are made overseas, so you don't get that job creation out of it. Well, when you look at that and you compare job creation, you're looking at the dark red or the purple sort of lines. And again, you see that even when you're looking at generation alternatives or conservation alternatives, the pay-as-you-throw and some of those programs do okay in job creation as well. So again, not totally out of the mark of what ought to be considered when you're putting together a portfolio. There are lots of other goals, policy goals that you might want in putting together a portfolio. Tons or greenhouse gas tons or kilowatt hours are not the only metric, but you also might care about jobs, how fast it'll go in, how well the programs are retained, auxiliary benefits, and a whole lot of other things that you can monetize and include in this program. And you end up with a ranked set of portfolios. It might be residential, commercial energy programs. It might be recycling programs and energy programs. Whatever kinds of programs you're putting together, whether you're looking at tons for recycling or whether you're looking at greenhouse gas for sustainability, you can rank the programs and figure out which ones are most cost effective. Let's put some of those in first. Recycling programs are way down there. You can also, by taking just energy versus energy plus recycling options, we marked this for our community. We found that they were going to reach their 25% goal faster and more cheaply if they added recycling programs into the mix. EPA redid how it counts some of that emission stuff, and in a new kind of accounting, they revisited and they said that if landfills are kind of the end of the whole provision of goods and materials that people consume, then in fact, the emissions from that, all the upstream stuff related to that, is more like 38%, puts us right on the same level as building energy use and transportation. So not so 3% anymore. The takeaways for the last slide are that there are a whole bunch of programs and policies that you consider for trying to get more profitable recycling. We talked about pay-as-you-throw every other week, single stream, mandates, bans, local options, and education. Traditional education so-so, maybe enhanced education, thinking about attitudes and other things can make that more and more effective. Solid waste is strong in both greenhouse gas and job impacts, and we should get in the game early when they're doing integrated planning related to sustainability. We should spend our political capital wisely, and that's what I find the numbers tell me. Thanks.
We'll take a couple questions. Does anyone have a question?
They're totally blown up with my words. Sorry about that. I talk fast.
Go ahead.
I have one question about single stream. I've talked to some sales reps for recycled paper, and their concern with single stream is they need the materials and they're not getting the high-grade office pack back for closing the loop on recycled paper. So can you speak to how much of that is happening, how much white paper can be recovered, or if there is a hybrid program where, especially in a commercial sector with a lot of paper, white might be segregated from everything else?
I haven't seen a lot on the commercial side. On the residential side, which has been more studied, I haven't seen that there's been a significant drop in how much white versus other paper is mixed in. The main concern I hear is that, oh gosh, the material's not clean enough, it has glass in it, and the glass contamination causes problems at the mills. I think that's an important consideration. I think that if mills have a significant damage item and pre-processing problem from material that has glass in it, that, first of all, let me say I think there are good single stream and good dual stream programs and bad single stream and bad dual stream processing programs. And you can go to a single stream plant and see 2 cities worth of stuff that got dropped off, and one looks crappy coming in, and believe me, it's going to be crappier coming out than another community that had much cleaner stuff coming in and going out. So it's not all about single stream versus dual stream. It is about how much attention is paid to that processing, whether it's single stream or dual stream. If a mill says that it's going to have a problem at the tail end, and that it's going to either grind up equipment faster, cause greater O&M problems, or needs to pre-process, then if that facility will pay a premium for clean material without glass in it, whether that comes from single stream or dual stream, I don't care, then they'll see that that the processing will be amped up in order to recover those revenues. From the perspective of a person who owns a MRF, a material recovery facility, it makes no sense to invest more money in cleaning up this, with 1 more step or 2 more steps or whatever it takes, if there's going to be no return on that investment. Their shareholders will lynch them. It's not, you really need to think about, where's your perspective, and if you need cleaner material, you've got to be willing to pay a premium for cleaner material, and that hasn't happened generally in the marketplace, and that's a market problem, and it's not a, gee, I penalize, we all should do it better out of the goodness of our heart. That's not the way this economy really works in the long run. Maybe in the short run with some do-good type mentality, but in the long run that's not going to be sustainable. And so anyway. On the commercial side, I haven't seen information that shows that they recycle less white paper. I'd be surprised if that was the case.
Okay, thank you so much. And please fill out your evaluation forms.